As part of cybersecurity basics, let's now talk about frameworks. An information security framework is a series of documented processes that are used to define policies and procedures around the implementation and ongoing management of information security controls in an enterprise environment. Organizations implement a framework based on security controls as part of their governance program to ensure security and privacy requirements are met. There are many approaches and frameworks that can be used to address risk in an organization. For example, NIST 853, 800-171, the CSF, PCI DSS, ISO 27000 series, CIS, NIST 837, the risk management frameworks, and a few others. But they all have some common elements. They must be consistent, measurable, standardized, comprehensive, and modular. When we're talking about consistent, they must be consistent in how information security and privacy is approached and applied. Measurable, in this term, the governance program must provide a way to determine progress and set goals. When we talk about standardized, we mean that they should rely on standardization so results from one organization or part of an organization can be compared in a meaningful way to other parts of that organization. Comprehensive, well, what we mean here is that they have to cover the minimum legal and regulatory requirements of an organization and be extensible to accommodate additional organization specific requirements. When we say modular, we're talking about only the controls or requirements needing modification are reviewed and updated for that organization. One example of a control framework is the United States National Institute of Standards and Technologies, NIST, Special Publication 853. 853 is a control framework made up of 385 possible controls within 19 control families. The framework includes the ability to scope and tailor controls to an organization's specific mission and requirements. There's also 800-171, which is used by contractors dealing with the government and handling controlled unclassified information, and 837, which is the risk management framework, and we'll talk more about these in just a few minutes. The International Organization for Standardization 27001 is an international control framework designed to cover organizations of all countries and all sizes. It's a series of information security management systems and standards containing 114 controls in 14 groups and is the best known standard for providing requirements for an information security management system. The Center for Internet Security CIS and Critical Security Controls CSC are a recommended set of actions for cyber defense that provide specific and actionable ways to stop most pervasive and dangerous attacks. It's comprised of 20 critical security controls, and its principal benefit is that the controls prioritize and focus a smaller number of actions with high payoff results. There are several other frameworks an organization may use as well, like ITEL, Information Technology Infrastructure Library, which looks at change control and service management, COSO, the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations, which is very similar to ISO 27001, and COBIT, Control Objectives for Information and Related Technology, which was created by ISACA, the Information Systems Audit and Control Association, for IT management and governance. All these frameworks provide security controls, which are methods, tools, mechanisms, and processes used in risk mitigation. You place safeguards in the form of controls before the risk is realized using one of these frameworks. Remember, a security control framework is a notional construct outlining the organization's approach to security, including a list of specific security processes, procedures, and solutions used by the organization. After you have selected a framework, you then deploy countermeasures to reduce the risk. In information security, risk is the likelihood that a threat source will exploit one or more vulnerabilities or the potential to create significant impacts or consequences that affect the organization's assets. NIST Special Publication 830, the Guide for Conducting Risk Assessments, defines vulnerabilities as an inherent weakness in an information system, security procedure, internal control, or implementation that could be exploited by a threat source. A threat source is any person, event, or environmental factor that could affect or harm a protected asset. A protected asset may include a network or its components, files and data, financial assets, or even personnel or organizational reputation. A vulnerability is a weakness in an asset or the absence of or weakness in safeguards or countermeasures. In other words, a vulnerability is a weakness that can be exploited by a threat. It's the hole through which a threat gains access to a protected asset. Using a sheep farmer analogy, a wolf, for example, would be a threat to the farmer's assets, the sheep, if the pen that they were in, surrounded by a fence, has a hole. The hole in the fence is a weakness in the countermeasure the farmer employed to protect his assets. That hole allows the threat, in this case the wolf, to take advantage of a vulnerability, the hole, and harm the assets, in this case the sheep. Countermeasures are what we put in place to reduce a threat's ability to exploit an exposure or that can lessen the impact to the organization when a threat is able to exploit that vulnerability. All security controls have an impact on operations. Control selection must entail a cost-benefit analysis and be tailored to the organization. We look at the cost-benefit analysis. Cost should be less than the value of the assets, or try to reduce the attack benefit. In other words, countermeasures should increase the cost of the attack, making it unattractive. Countermeasures could be used to solve a real problem, like a vulnerability, an issue, or reduce a threat. Security controls and countermeasures should support and enable business tasks and functions by using a defense in-depth methodology to maximize our security benefits. Let's look at a couple of these frameworks and what they provide. Generally Accepted Information Security Principles, or GAISP, is a successor project to the Generally Accepted Systems Security Principles, or the GASSP. It draws on established security guidance and standards to create comprehensive, objective guidance for information security professionals, organizations, governments, and users. The goal of the GAISP is to collect information security principles that have been proven in practice and accepted by practitioners, and to document those principles in a single repository. Basically, it incorporates the consensus at a particular time as to the principles, standards, conventions, and mechanisms that the information security practitioners should employ, that information processing products should provide, and that information owners and organizational governance should acknowledge to ensure the security of information and information systems. ISO 27000 is a series of information management systems and standards. For example, ISO 27000 is the overview and vocabulary, 27001 is the requirements, 27002 is the code of practice, 27003 implementation guidance, 27005 is risk management, 27006 audit and certification, and there's a lot more of these documents in the series. The series provides best practice recommendations on information security management, risks, and controls within the context of an overall information security management system. Organizations can use the standards as the basis for developing security standards and security management practices. ISO 27002 contains over 100 detailed information security controls. COSO focuses on ensuring valid financial reporting. It supports Sarbanes-Oxley's Section 404 compliance. It's relevant to public companies and their auditors, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and other regulators. COSO identifies 5 areas of internal controls necessary to meet the financial reporting and disclosure objectives. They are control environments, risk assessment, control activities, information and communications, and monitoring. Some organizations working towards Sarbanes-Oxley's Section 404 compliance have adopted the COSO internal control model framework. COBIT focuses on IT management and governance, and much like PCI DSS and ISO 27002, it's focused on compliance with the standards that include prevention, detection, and reaction to security incidents. PCI DSS was developed by the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards Council to enhance payment card data security. It's targeted towards merchants and service providers, but is mandated for systems involved in handling an organization's payment card services. It's not a law, it's a self-regulated approach. At a high-level view, a framework that deals with security program development is the ISO 27000 series. It's the international standards on how to develop and maintain an information security management system, which was developed by ISO and IEC. Frameworks that deal with enterprise architecture development are ZACMAN, which is a model for the development of enterprise architectures. The Open Group Architecture Framework, TOGAF. This is a model and methodology for the development of enterprise architectures developed by the Open Group. The U.S. Department of Defense Architecture Framework, DODAF, which ensures interoperability of systems to meet military mission goals. British Ministry of Defense Architecture Framework, MODAF, is used mainly in military support missions developed by the British Ministry of Defense. The Sherwood Applied Business Security Architecture, SABSA, is a development of information security enterprise architecture which is similar to ZACMAN. ZACMAN and SABSA allow for the communication and collaboration of all entities in the development of the architecture. While not specific to security architectures, it does provide a logical structure for integrating the various perspectives such as the plan, design, and building aspects of the architecture. Frameworks that deal with the security controls development are COBIT, which is a business framework to allow for IT enterprise management and governance that was developed by the Information Systems Audit and Control Association, ASACA. NIST 853, which is a set of controls to protect U.S. federal systems developed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. The Committee of Sponsoring Organizations of the Treadway Commission, COSO, is an internal control integrated framework to help reduce the risk of financial fraud. And finally, frameworks that deal with process management development are the Information Technology Infrastructure Library, ITIL, which is the de facto standard for best practices for IT service management and service improvement. Six Sigma, which is a business management strategy that can be used to carry out process improvement. It's a set of techniques and tools for process improvement. The Capability Maturity Model Integration, CMMI, sometimes referred to as CMM, is an organizational development for process improvement methodology developed by Carnegie Mellon University. CMMI focuses on quality management processes and has 5 maturity levels that contain several key practices within each maturity level. The 5 CMMI levels are initial, repeatable, defined, managed, and optimizing. It's important to note here that the CMMI ratings are assigned to the company based on the level that they certify at, not the product that that company is developing. When we see a company that has a CMMI rating of 1, an initial process, that means that they have a starting point for their products. They don't have a documented process, just a starting point for the development of their products. Companies that receive a CMMI rating of 2, that means that they have a repeatable process also. In other words, they have an initial starting point and they have a repeatable process that is at least documented sufficiently so that it can be repeated. In other words, the same steps may be attempted in the development of their products. A company that receives a CMMI level 3 rating is a company that has an initial starting point. They have it documented enough so that they can repeat it, and they have a defined process. In other words, it is confirmed as a standard business process for that organization. Companies that receive a CMMI level 4 rating means that they have an initial process, it's repeatable, it's defined, and it's managed. The process is quantitatively managed in accordance with agreed upon metrics. And finally, companies that receive a CMMI rating of 5, that means that they have an initial, repeatable, defined, and managed process, including the optimization. Process management includes deliberate process optimization or improvements. Basically, this is a framework for evaluating and improving development processes. It assumes the quality of development process, which directly impacts the quality of the product itself. In summary, frameworks and their controls provide organizations a method, tool, mechanism, and process to mitigate risk to an acceptable level as defined by the organization's senior management. Frameworks can be tailored to the organizational needs to control risk by implementing countermeasures. Frameworks can facilitate security program development enterprise architecture development, security controls development, and process management development. And finally, CMMI, also known as CMM levels, are a process improvement methodology. The ratings are assigned to the company based on the level that they certify at, not the products that the company develops.